Hello, my dear students. Assalamu alaikum. Hope you are doing good. Today will be the last presentation on heart. In this presentation, we will mainly talk about the applied anatomy of the heart. That means different clinical conditions related with the heart. We have already discussed about the applied anatomy of the pericardium. So today will be solely on heart. Not only that, I will discuss something about the cardiac skeleton as it was not included in the previous slide. So let's see. Hello my students, Assalamu alaikum. So today we will start the final part of heart presentation. We will start with the cardiac skeleton of the heart. Now what is the cardiac skeleton? The cardiac skeleton is also known as the fibrous skeleton of the heart. It is not the so-called skeleton that is present inside our body, because we know the skeletal system of our body includes bones, cartilages. So over here what is actually happening? This skeleton is mainly formed by a fibrous tissue. So in the definition we can say it is a highly dense single structure of connective tissue that lies in between atrium and ventricles. It anchors and supports the valves and also influences the force exerted through them during the time of heart contractions. So from these lines we can understand that this fibrous skeleton is present in between the atrium and the ventricles, and they are encircling, as we can see, the valves. Not only they are encircling the valves, but also they are supporting the valves, and also they are anchoring the valves. When the blood is passing through these valves, they are supporting the valves so that they can contract or they can relax very systematically. Now we can see that some of the particular part of this fibrous skeleton, as we can see over here, are also named. Just like in between the tricuspid and the bicuspid valve, as we can see, the area is called the trigonum fibrosum dextrum. Also in between the bicuspid valve and the aortic valve, this narrow strip of this fibrous skeleton is known as trigonum fibrosum sinistrum. So these are the parts of the fibrous skeleton. Now what is this function of the cardiac skeletons? It forms the central support of the heart. Obviously it is present in between the atrium and the ventricles, that's why it is providing a support being in the central portion of the heart. It provides attachment to the bicuspid and the tricuspid valves, cardiac muscle fibers, membranous part of the interventricular septum. Now we can see that the fibrous skeleton is very much well established in between the bicuspid and the tricuspid valve, which is very much obvious in that picture. Also we should know that the cardiac muscle fibers are inserted into these fibrous skeletons. Not only that, we know that the interventricular septum was having two parts, muscular part which was thicker and the membranous part which was very much thin. But this membranous part is well supported and provides attachment to the cardiac skeleton of the heart. Now it keeps the cardiac valve competent. Obviously competency of valve is very much necessary while there is systole and the diastole within the heart, because the sufficient amount of blood should pass through them. Now it acts as the electrical insulator, which is very important. Electrical insulator is something which inhibits the flow of electrical wave or flow of electrical impulses. We know that the contraction wave that is present at the atrium tends to go to the ventricles, but due to the presence of this cardiac skeleton, the contraction wave directly cannot go from the atrium to the ventricle. They will only choose the bundle of his for this transmission. So it blocks the direct spread of the electrical impulses from the atria to the ventricles. The impulse go only through the bundle of his. That's why the contraction of the atrium and the contraction of the ventricle do not occur simultaneously. It prevents overdilatation of the valve openings. Obviously when the blood is flowing to the valves, it tends to dilate, but it prevents the overdilatation. Now what about the applied anatomy of the cardiac skeleton? Weakening of cardiac skeleton may lead to cardiac valve incompetence, where this incompetent closure may lead to mitral aortic or tricuspid valve regurgitation. We know that due to the incompetence of the valve, the blood which is flowing through it cannot go normally. Even when the valves are not properly closed, then the blood may backflow from the ventricle to the atrium, or also from the vessels, that means pulmonary trunk or the aorta, to the ventricles. This backflow is called the regurgitation. So due to the incomplete closure of the valves, this regurgitation can happen. Now let's talk about the applied anatomy of the heart, which is the main topic today. Let's start with the atrial septal defect, or also known as ASD. An atrial septal defect is a birth defect of the heart in which there is a hole in the interatrial septum. It is commonly present due to the persistence of the foramina ovale. We know that there should be a partition over here, which is called the interatrial septum. This is the right atrium and this is the left atrium, and this is the septal defect. If the foramina ovale, which was present during the time of heart development, still persists after the birth, then this opening may cause the blood flow from the left atrium to the right atrium, and ultimately excess amount of blood will be accommodated in the right atrium. That excess blood will go into the right ventricle, and you know from the right ventricle the blood will go into the lung. So there will be excessive amount of mixed oxygenated and deoxygenated blood that will go into the lungs. Next topic is ventricular septal defect, or VSD, which is more common. It commonly happens in the membranous part of the interventricular septum. We know that the ventricular septum is having two parts, muscular part which is very thick and the membranous part which is thin. This membranous part mainly comes from two sources, the endocardial cushion and the neural crest cell. And about the neural crest cell, these cells do not present into the heart. They has to come from the distal places, and they have to migrate themselves in this place to make the membranous part of the interventricular septum. So during the time of migration, if they fail to come, then there will be some gap over here at the membranous part, and that is called the ventricular septal defect. And due to the presence of the ventricular septal defect, blood may go from the left ventricle to the right ventricle. That means oxygenated blood from the left ventricle will go into the right ventricle, and again the right ventricular workload will be increased, and excessive amount of blood will be accommodated in the right ventricle, which will go into the right through the pulmonary trunk to the lungs. Now, one of the most important topic is the Fallot's tetralogy. Fallot's tetralogy, the name itself says that there will be combination of the four signs that will be present in this clinical condition. So the signs are ventricular septal defect, overriding of the aorta, pulmonary valve stenosis, and the right ventricular hypertrophy. Let me tell you, these four signs will not come all together. It is actually the main congenital abnormality is the ventricular septal defect. And due to the presence of the ventricular septal defect, there will be the overriding of the aorta. And due to the overriding of the aorta, there will be the pulmonary valve stenosis. And due to the pulmonary valve stenosis, there will be the right ventricular hypertrophy. So it means that these symptoms or signs will come one after another, and one symptom is triggering to form the other symptoms. So what is actually happening? You know that initially there will be the ventricular septal defect that we have discussed earlier, and we can see this is the ventricular septal defect. We know that this septum is partitioning the two openings, the aorta and the pulmonary trunk. The pulmonary trunk is supposed to be present at the right side, and the aorta is supposed to be present at the left side of the ventricle. So when there is a gap over here, the aorta, which is carrying the high pressure blood, it is trying to displace itself from its left side to the right side on this gap, which is called the overriding of the aorta. So due to the presence of the ventricular septal defect, the overriding of the aorta is happening over here. Now, as this overriding of the aorta is happening, it is compressing the pulmonary trunk. We can see as this aorta is now from the left side to the right side in its abnormal position, it is compressing the pulmonary trunk, and which causes the pulmonary valve stenosis. That means there will be narrowing of the pulmonary valve. And now you can understand this displaced aorta is compressing the pulmonary trunk, and the pulmonary trunk became narrow. So obviously the blood from the right ventricle will go into the pulmonary trunk are not going properly. With the narrowing of this pulmonary valve, the blood is less, very less amount of blood is going from the right ventricle to the pulmonary trunk, and that's why there will be the increased accumulation of the blood at the right ventricle. Why? Because the blood is not properly going into the pulmonary trunk due to the narrowing, and also blood is coming from the left ventricle to the right ventricle because the left ventricular pressure is higher than the right ventricle. So there will be excessive amount of blood into this right ventricle, and due to the excessive amount of blood there will be increased workload at the right ventricle. So the right ventricle needs to work more and more to pump out this excessive amount of blood to keep the heart normal. So due to the increased workload, the wall of the right ventricle is now very much thick, as we can see. The wall of the right ventricle is very thin, and the wall of the left ventricle was 3 times thicker than the right ventricle. But over here we can see that the wall of the right ventricle is more thicker than the left ventricle, which is called the right ventricular hypertrophy. So this is the clinical picture of the right ventricular Fallot strictology, and where we can see the normal heart and the abnormal heart, and due to the mixture of the oxygenated and the deoxygenated blood there will be cyanosis. As we can see, the baby is having central cyanosis, like bluish discoloration of the fingertips and also lips. Now, one of the most commonest thing that is present in the vascular system of the heart, especially in the coronary artery, is called the coronary arterial disease or atherosclerosis, very much commonly present in the older group or the middle age group of the people. Now what is actually happening over here? We can see this is the lumen of the coronary artery, and the lumen is not very much patent. We can see there are abnormal accommodation of the atherosclerotic plug over here. Over here the heart muscle is receiving insufficient blood supply. Narrowing of the vessel happens due to the subendothelial deposition of the atherosclerotic plaque, which is actually the fatty deposition in the wall of the arteries. These are the atherosclerotic plaque, that is the abnormal deposition of the fat over here, which leads the insufficient blood that is flowing through it. And obviously when there is insufficient blood is going through the coronary arteries, the heart will not receive sufficient oxygen at their muscular level, and there will be angina pectoris, which is the heart pain from the ischemia. That means lack of blood flow and oxygen to the cardiac muscle. When this angina pectoris is persistent, that means the insufficient blood is always going into the heart muscle, there will be myocardial infarction. That means the death of the area of the heart muscle from lack of oxygen. We know the heart muscle needs oxygen. So if there is a persistent lack of oxygen in the heart muscle, there will be the myocardial infarction, and the death of the cardiac muscle will happen, and that muscle will be replaced by the scar tissue or the fibrous tissue. As we can see, the lumen is pretty much blocked due to the accommodation of the atherosclerotic plaque. So what will be the treatment when this atherosclerosis can happen, and when the vessels is very much narrowed? Then we need to do something, and the first thing that we do is the percutaneous transluminal coronary angioplasty. So first of all, what we need to do, we need to insert a catheter along with the balloon. We will inflate the balloon, and that will create pressure into the lumen, and the atherosclerosis plaque will be very much flat. We can see due to the inflation of the balloon, it will flattening out the atherosclerotic plaque, and the lumen is little bit wider right now. This inflation and deflation of the ballooning is done repeatedly until unless the lumen is normal. Sometimes after the ballooning, when the lumen is wider, there will be introduction of the stent. This is a metallic thing that is inserted into the lumen to keep the lumen open. We will see a video to understand this procedure. Let's see.
Coronary angioplasty, also called as the percutaneous transluminal or balloon angioplasty, is a treatment procedure to restore the blood flow in the narrowed or blocked coronary arteries caused due to plaques or blood clots. Most coronary angioplasty procedures last between 30 minutes to 3 hours. Once the patient is admitted, his heart is monitored and is given an intravenous sedative to relax the body. A needle is inserted through the wrist into the radial artery. A guard wire is then passed through the needle and is guided through the arterial system up to the heart. A flexible catheter is slipped over the wire and threaded up to the heart. This is monitored using a continuous X-ray imaging device called fluoroscope. At this point, the guard wire is removed and the tip of catheter is positioned to enter the coronary artery. A special dye is injected which allows the fluoroscope to take X-ray images of the arterial interiors and help in identifying the position of the block. This is called angiogram. Once the blockage is identified, a flexible guard wire is inserted into the artery vessel, followed by a balloon-tipped catheter over this wire to position itself at the site of the blockage. Rapid inflation and deflation of the small balloon pushes the vessel wall out, re-establishing the flow of blood in the artery. After the blocked vessel is reopened, the deflated balloon catheter is withdrawn from the artery. The same treatment procedure is repeated in the case of multiple blockages. Most patients may also receive a coronary stent, which is a small tube made of wire mesh designed to keep the artery open once it has been treated. A collapsed stent is placed over the deflated balloon catheter as it is inserted into position. When the balloon is inflated, the stent expands and locks itself into place. The deflated balloon and catheter are withdrawn, leaving the stent behind to hold the artery open permanently. Post-treatment, a pressure bandage is applied over the radial artery to prevent bleeding. One will need to lie down for several hours, during which signs of bleeding or chest pain will be monitored. The patient may either be discharged on the same day or after an overnight stay at the hospital. Coronary
So we have seen a video regarding how we can do the stenting within the coronary arteries. Now the most important thing is that sometimes this stenting procedure or ballooning procedure do not work. That means the artery is that much narrow that it cannot be restored properly. Then what we can do? The only options that we have is coronary artery bypass grafting or CABG. What actually happening over here is we are using an extra vessel to bypass the obstruction. That means we are connecting the normal aorta, bypassing the blocked area to the distal portion so that the blood can go from this aorta to the desired artery, and this blocked portion will remain as blocked, to re-establishing the blood supply by doing the bypass. So coronary bypass surgery redirects blood around a section of a blocked or partially blocked artery in your heart to improve blood flow to your heart muscle. The procedure involves taking a healthy blood vessels from the leg, arm or chest and connecting it beyond the blocked arteries in your heart. That means these extra vessels can be collected from the chest, or it can be collected from the leg. Commonly it is collected from the leg, and the vessel is named as the great saphenous vein. Now let's see. In this picture we can see that here two vessels has been given as a bypass vessels or the bypass graft. One is the vein which is collecting from the leg, the saphenous vein, as we can see over here. And also we can do grafting by using an artery directly from the large arteries, like this one. Commonly we are using venous grafting as saphenous grafting, which is a vein collected from the leg, or we can use an artery that is called the internal mammary artery or internal thoracic artery as a bypass graft. So coronary artery bypass grafting is done by the venous graft or the arterial grafting. Whatever that is, we can see the blood is bypassing the narrow vessels. The narrow vessels, we can see venous grafting is done, arterial grafting is done. So that was all for today. The clinical anatomy of the heart. This is an artificial heart. In the coming days, maybe the artificial heart will be established within the chest cavity of the human being, and the human will be semi-robotic. Thank you very much for your patience hearing. You may have some of the queries and the questions. Feel free to let me know that. Thank you.